Hello, my lovely students. How are you? I hope you are all good, fine, and well. Today, we are going to explain our new lesson, a habitat. What is a habitat? What does a habitat consist of? And why are there different kinds of habitats? Living things are not scattered at random in nature. They are found in places appropriate to their way of living. Living things are humans, animals, and plants. We call them living things because they live, they respire, and they die. These living things are found in places appropriate to their way of living. These places are called habitats. What is a habitat? A habitat is a place with its population of living things. For example, the hedge around the garden is a habitat. So the hedge is located around the garden and it is used for protection. It protects the house garden. We have many kinds of animals and plants that live in the hedge. Like what? The plants of the hedge are the trees, the grass, the flowers, and the climbing plants. Some animals live in the hedge, like bird, spider, and snail. For example, the bird builds its nest on the trees of the hedge. Also, the spider spins its web on the trees, and the snail hides in the grass of the hedge. So, we have many animals and plants that live in this habitat. We have factors that affect any habitat. These factors are the nature of the soil and the climate. That's why we find many different kinds of habitats. For example, the mountain and the desert are two different habitats. They are affected by the nature of the soil and the climate. The soil in the mountain is different from the soil in the desert. The soil in the mountain is fertile, while the soil in the desert is dry. Also, the climate of the mountain is different from the climate of the desert. The climate of the mountain is rainy and not very windy, while the climate of the desert is very windy and the rain is scarce. This means that it does not rain a lot in the desert. That's why the desert is poor in plants, because plants need water to grow and they can't live without water. Whereas the mountain is rich in plants and trees because the climate of the mountain is rainy. We conclude that we distinguish different kinds of habitats, and these habitats are affected by the nature of the soil and the climate. Let's discover together another habitat. This habitat is the pond. What are the inhabitants of the pond? The pond groups amazing varieties of animals and plants. What do these animals and plants do in order to live in this habitat? The plants of the pond are the carex, the reed, and the willow. These plants like humid soil and they are well held to the soil by their roots. Other plants of the pond are the algae that floats on the water surface and the water lily that sways in the water with its soft stems. Some animals of the pond are the frog, the duck, and the carp. The frog can swim and jump with its legs. The duck moves on the water with its webbed legs, and the carp needs fresh water to swim. Each habitat has its inhabitants. What are the inhabitants of the forest? Which varieties of living things do we find in a forest? The inhabitants of the forest are animals and plants. The highest plants of the forest are the large trees. These dominate the forest plants. Other plants of the forest are ferns, mushrooms, and genista. For example, mushrooms grow in the shade of the trees. We have many kinds of animals that live in the forest. Some of them are the fox, the snail, the bird, the wasp, the butterfly, the ants, the earthworm, the hedgehog, and many other kinds of animals. We conclude that the pond inhabitants are different from the forest inhabitants, and the inhabitants are adapted to their habitat. So each habitat is defined by its location and its inhabitants.